Today we're talking about the geographies of the super rich, and this is part of GEG 301. And I just want to just explore where the super rich might land. And most of these statistics were based on the pandemic data. And I'm using the pandemic data for a lot of reasons to show how the inequalities globally and where the wealth is concentrated. So what do these numbers represent? 493, 40, and 205. 493, 40, and 205. And I'll pause for a moment so that you can maybe think about exactly what 493, 40, and 205 might represent. So 493 represents the April 2021 Forbes New Billionaires. 205 of the 493 were billionaires in China. And at least 40 of the 493 billionaires became billionaires because of COVID-19 related products that included the masks, that included the hand sanitizers, that included some of the nuances that we had to have to keep ourselves safe. And even when the pandemic disrupted the world's economy in many places, this did not necessarily affect the richest of the rich. And we waited bated breath to see if Alabama workers at Amazon would vote to unionize. And because of social conditioning, unionizing becomes quite important. Interestingly enough, in 2021, we saw the Amazon employees voted against their own interest. And we're seeing the advent of unionization, especially in the United States, as a way to improve social conditioning and worker conditionings as well. So the total wealth in 2019, right before the pandemic, you see the United States has a greater portion of this total wealth pie, if you will, 29.93% in the United States concentrated there. In Canada, to our north, 2.38%. We see China as the one closest to the United States with 17.7% of the world's wealth. And we see by geographical locations, if you will, Europe perhaps in various shades of green, Asia in various shades of blue, North America, excluding Mexico, but certainly orange is a variation perhaps of the hot pink there, but Mexico is listed. Also, we have Brazil, Colombia, Chile listed in orange as well. So this gives you a color schemata. And the largest continent, Africa, is listed in purple, has the lowest per capita of wealth. And I'll say more about the continent of Africa. Again, I'll post this to you on Canvas. This is the world map of billionaires as of 2020, the number of billionaires in total wealth accumulated. Again, the United States sticks out with 614 billionaires. In North America, it's 658. That's inclusive of our neighbors to the north in Canada. We see the number of billionaires to our south with Mexico, 1245 in Brazil or South America. We see 388 in China, these large numbers, 102 in India. We see in Germany, the list there for Europe, 510, Asia, 799. Asia certainly has far more billionaires than in the United States. In Africa, that's listed in brown, we see the small number of 19. I'll share this video with you as well, the link to this video to you on Canvas so that you might see how this changed. So while your wealth is most likely driven by the dollars in your bank account and the value of your stock portfolio and house, wealth also includes a number of smaller things, such as old furniture, maybe in your garage or vintage painting on your wall. And so, from a macro perspective of a country, wealth is even more all encompassing. It's not just about the assets held by a private household or businesses, but also those owned by the public. What is the value of a toll bridge or toll roads or an aging nuclear power plant? What are those values there? And what are the tax base for the utilities that we have bonds for, bond issues that people can buy into bonds to support the local municipalities when it comes to electrical grids, as well as natural energy sources, et cetera. Those owned by the public are also most important in it when it comes to tabulating wealth and assets. So the total wealth, again, in 2019, the total wealth grew by 9.1 trillion to $360.6 trillion, which amounts to a 2.6 increase over the previous year. And this is the wealth that we have per billion by the regions. In North America has 31.8% of the global share. Europe has 25.2%. Asia Pacific has 18%. And then China has 17.7%. We move on down to India, 3.5%, Latin America, 2.7%, and Africa, 1.1%. Again, this is the rank of the top 15 countries that hold the most wealth, according to the Credit Suisse, that gives us the credit rankings of our countries. Our credit rankings of the countries are just as important as our FICO scores of the individuals, our credit worthiness. And so the countries with the most wealth, number one is the United States, number two is China, number three is Japan, number four is Germany, and we can go all the way down the list. As a matter of fact, China holds actually the world's largest economy, and the United States is indebted to China, as well as a couple of other places and all the other countries there. So it's an interesting fact that we have here when it comes to the amount of wealth. And again, wealth is also inclusive of the public utilities that are owned by countries as well, not just the hardcore, say, gold standard or rubies or diamonds, those natural resources, but also those public spaces such as energy, that are inclusive of a nation's wealth and assets, those that are owned by the public. So the 15th wealthiest nations combine 84.3% of the global wealth, and leading the pack is the United States, our geopolitical area called the United States, which holds 106 trillion of the world's wealth, equal to 29.4%. Interestingly, the United States economy makes up 23.9% of the size of the world economy by comparison. So behind the United States is China, the only other country with a double-digit share of global wealth, equal to 17.7% of the wealth, or 63.8. So if you combine the wealth of the United States and China, it's much more than the next three countries in aggregate, which is a pretty powerful situation. And in a moment, I'll share some things about BRICS, which is an acronym. So in April of 2021, over 567 billion was amassed by the 10 richest people in the world in less than a year. 567 billion, let that sink in, amassed by 10 of the richest people in the world in less than a year. So to put this in perspective, that's more than sevenfold the wealth accumulated by the top 10 in the time period prior. So here's one example. Elon Musk witnessed his wealth increased at least 500% in the last year. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos earned a cool 68.6 billion extra money. April 2021, this is the map of the total number of billionaires. In the United States, 724, Germany, 136, Russia, 117, China, or Greater China, comes in number 2 under the United States with 698, and then India, 140. Granted, India and China are on the same continent, and that is the continent of Asia. Germany and Russia are also on the same continent, and that is the European continent. Total number of billionaires and self-made status, and why this is important. We've got self-made. The majority of the billionaires have been self-made. You see that in the hot pink color. The inherited is the darker green color, and then the inherited and growing is the lighter green. So clearly, from 2000 to 2021, the number of self-made billionaires has grown exponentially. The 10 wealthiest in the world with a net worth of 182 million. Jeff Bezos is the wealthiest person in the world. After 26 years, Bezos announced that he would step down as Amazon CEO. And then he began to, as we witnessed with Blue Origin opening up the promise to travel into space for everybody. This was based on the data of 2021, in March of 2021. This is the ranking of of 2020, 2021. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, the Arnault family, which is the family that we have, the LV or Louis Vuitton. We have Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, our neighbor up to the north in Omaha, Nebraska, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Ellison, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, and Daniel Gilbert of Quicken Loans. These are the ones who comprise of now the 10 at this point in 2021, the wealthiest in the world. These are the richest people in the world, and you can see, I'll put this link also for you to have a closer look, the richest people in the world. And we see only a few women and a few people of color. Global inequality as of 2021, we see the greatest levels of global inequality in Asia, in Europe, Latin America. North America ranks number 5 in this group. Sub-Saharan Africa is at the bottom of the list when it comes to global inequalities. So inequality is the gift that keeps on giving. And while the wealthy nations have been able to secure enough, especially during COVID-19, when before we had the prevalence of vaccinations, there were those who even as of 2021 were not able to have access to the shots. And the rich nations, needless to say, were able to move and save more lives and help their economies recover even faster. And some of our nations who did not have access to the vaccines became had great ingenuity and created ways in which their economy could continue to grow in the midst of everything else. The richest in the world ever. You'll enjoy this YouTube clip that I will put a link in and ask for you to reflect on as well. The richest in the world ever. No one has compared to this man and his kingdom that was amassed. And it's an animation, so I think you'll appreciate it as well. The most powerful families who run the world will be surprising to you as well, and where they are geographically located. You'll be surprised with this particular link as well, what it means to be a powerful family who runs the world, and where are they geographically located. So the ultimate question, as I was referring to the fact that Africa was listed at the bottom, if Africa is so rich, why is it so poor? And there is this idea of the curse of riches. And although the continent of Africa is blessed with gold, diamonds, oil, coltan, which makes our batteries for our cell phones, as well as the batteries to power our electric vehicles, the coltan, the bauxite, uranium, iron ore, and other valuable resources, its inhabitants have long numbered among the world's poorest. While few sub-Saharan African nations are doing relatively well, most are in great poverty. And with this continent's abundant natural resources, in so many cases, have so little effect on people's quality of life over so many years. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding the grouping of 49 nations located in the South Saharan Desert. Again, our geographical area. And if we go back to colonization and globalization, how in the world could a continent so rich with natural resources, where the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the English, the Spanish all wanted to have stake and have amassed great wealth with the gains in the abundance of natural resources on the continent of Africa and even China now. So the effects of colonization, after more than 5 decades have passed since the end of colonial times, with the last groups expressing their freedom from the British and from the other colonizers, African governments often still appear clueless when it comes to lifting their people from extreme poverty. And remember, poverty is condition. It has nothing with being, it's different than being poor or broke. Poverty is a condition, but change seems to be impossible. Many international organizations, foreign governments, and private groups that have been trying since the era of independence to promote regional development, food production, education, better housing, healthcare, improved infrastructure, jobs, and economic growth. There's still great challenges. As a matter of fact, there was an international global citizens conference just a couple of weeks ago in Ghana, promoting this idea of Africa rising again after years of being subjected under colonization. But the new colonizers, everyone seems to have an explanation for this tragic phenomenon of colonizers, citing, pervasive corruption, dysfunctional democratic institutions, as well as justice system, greedy multinational corporations, shady local and international elites, incompetent or ineffective international aid agencies, resource wars raged by domestic militias, as well as outside armies and the leftover vestiges of colonialism, or this new type of colonialism driven by players like China and Israel. When I was in Kenya, I was just surprised a couple of years ago. In 2018, I was surprised to see the number of street signs that were written in Chinese. And I asked several people in Kenya, why not in Swahili? And they were saying that it's because the Chinese have come over and have built these roadways, have paved these roadways leading towards the great natural resources there. And so the road signs are written in Chinese, not necessarily in Swahili. And it was disheartening to hear the story. So in this book, The Looting Machine, Warlords, Oligarchs, Corporations, Smugglers, and the Theft of Africa's Wealth, it goes a step further by Thomas Burgess. He argues that each of us bears responsibility for the situation every time we thoughtlessly fill our cars with gas, buy a gold or a diamond wedding ring, sip a fizzy drink in an aluminum can, or even use our cell phone. And now, with the advent of the electric vehicles, we also have to give a thought to Africa, because if it were not for this continent and the looting that took place, we would not have the trappings that we have right now that make our lives this modern sense of greater utility. And so he says, I started to see the thread that connects a massacre in a remote African village with the pleasures and comforts that we in the richer parts of the world enjoy. It weaves through the globalized economy, from war zones to the pinnacles of power and even wealth in New York, Hong Kong, and London. This is what Berger writes. He says, follow that thread. If you follow that thread, you'll follow all of it goes back to the continent of Africa. So the book describes the secret links from a state-owned Chinese oil company to an obscure Chinese businessman, with 7 different names, to a shell corporation, to a second shell corporation, to a major international investment firm, to a close buddy of an African president. Just follow and you will see how these billionaires have become billionaires based on their investments, or excuse me, or their connections to Africa. So outsiders often think of Africa as a great drain on the philanthropy, a continent that guzzles aids to no avail and who contributes little to the global economy in return. But look more closely at the resource industry and the relationship between Africa and the rest of the world. It looks different. As a matter of fact, he cites that in 2010, fuel and mineral exports from Africa were worth 333 billion, more than 7 times the value of the aid that went in the opposite direction. And our billionaires have become billionaires because of their close connections to African natural resources. So the empires of colonial Europe and the Cold War superpowers have given way to a new form of dominion over the continent that serves as this mind of the world. And these new empires controlled not by nations on the continent of Africa, but by alliances, unaccountable African ruling governors through shadow states, middle lenders connect them with global resources, and multinational companies from the West and the East that cloak their corruption in corporate secrecy, he writes. And I'm going to include a link about a story in the Democratic Republic of Congo mining cobalt, which is used for our electric vehicles and our cell phones. And what this does in terms of our being a conscious consumer and making sure that we are not stripping others of opportunity to succeed and just to be healthy. So I want to also bring to your attention a new world superpower, and the acronym is BRICS, and it stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And I will include those links to you on Canvas to look at and to reflect upon. And also a link to Liberia. Liberia was a country that was established by freed slaves in an effort after the Emancipation Proclamation to have this return of freed slaves back to Africa. And so Liberia, which stands for Land of Liberty. And I will share that link with you. And so your assignment would be to reflect upon the things that have been shared as we continue to look at the geographies of the super rich and where they might live. Thank you.